For more than 30 years, the Walkman was the most copied object in consumer electronics and the most quietly abandoned. And then, in October 2010, Sony confirmed that the last cassette Walkman had already left its Japanese factory 6 months earlier, and almost nobody had noticed it go. In May 1946, engineer Masaru Ibuka and businessman Akio Morita founded Tokyo Tsushin Kogyo in a bomb-damaged Tokyo department store. By 1979, the firm had renamed itself Sony, but its tape recorder division was struggling against low-priced consumer boomboxes. That February, Ibuka faced a practical travel problem. He frequently flew long-distance flights and carried Sony's TC-D5, a professional stereo recorder that weighed 1 kilogram, to listen to opera. Ibuka asked audio division leader Norio Oga to create a lightweight, playback-only machine for his next trip. Sony engineers bypassed a clean sheet design and modified the Pressman, a monaural cassette recorder used by Japanese reporters. In 4 days, the team stripped out the recording head, the erase lever, and the tape counter, then installed a stereo playback head and the amplification circuit from the TC-D5. On July 1, 1979, the modified Pressman went on sale in Japan as the TPSL-2. Sony priced the blue and silver metal device at 33,000 yen, which was roughly $150. The unit weighed 391 grams. The design omitted both the built-in speaker and the recording circuitry. Instead, the chassis featured 2 headphone jacks and a small orange hotline button. Co-founder Akio Morita insisted on these additions. He worried that listening to music alone in public would seem rude and antisocial to bystanders. Despite his corporate authority, internal skepticism persisted. Sony executives and retail partners believed that a playback-only tape player would fail. They argued that consumers had no interest in a machine that could not record. Domestic retailers refused to stock the inventory, leaving the first run of 30,000 units stalled on warehouse shelves, with only 3,000 units finding buyers during the first month. On June 22, 1979, Sony bussed journalists to Tokyo's Yoyogi Park for a product demonstration. The reporters received a press kit without clear product branding and left the park confused by a device that only played music. This initial confusion reflected a broader sales struggle. The 3,000 units sold in July 1979 sat in stark contrast to the company's monthly forecast of 5,000 sales. Sony possessed almost no advertising budget. Instead, the company sent young employees into Yoyogi Park on Sundays throughout the summer. These staffers approached passers-by, placed lightweight headphones on their ears, and played cassette tapes to demonstrate the stereo sound. Staff members rode tandem bicycles and skateboards through the crowds while wearing the devices. This direct approach bypassed traditional media skepticism. By the end of August, the campaign succeeded, and the entire initial production run of 30,000 units sold out. Sony exported its new player under localized names. In June 1980, the device arrived in the United States as the Soundabout. In Britain, retailers sold it as the Stowaway, while Swedish consumers bought the Freestyle. By 1981, Akio Morita unified the branding under the Walkman name worldwide. In July 1982, the township of Woodbridge, New Jersey, voted unanimously to ban headphones on public streets. The ordinance carried a $50 fine and up to 15 days in jail for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers. At least 9 states restricted headphone use while driving that same year. On October 7, 1982, retiree Oscar Gross deliberately crossed a Woodbridge street wearing unplugged headphones to test the law. Gross received a summons, and his case sparked national newspaper debates over whether personal audio was destroying civic social life. The legal challenges failed to overturn the laws, but the public rapidly normalized the practice. In 1986, the Oxford English Dictionary entered Walkman as a generic noun, completing its transition from corporate trademark to everyday language. In 1983, Sony expanded the reach of personal audio by releasing the yellow WMF5 Sports Walkman, a device encased in a water-resistant ABS plastic shell designed for heavy movement. The model linked personal playback technology with the rising consumer market for outdoor running and aerobics. In 1984, the company introduced the D50 Discman, which created the portable compact disc category and proved that digital high-fidelity audio could also travel. By 1989, cumulative worldwide sales of the cassette-based Walkman line reached 50 million units, establishing the brand as a dominant global force in consumer electronics. For approximately 15 subsequent years, the device remained the default physical object carried by individuals to maintain a private soundtrack in public spaces, permanently normalizing the daily practice of personal auditory isolation in urban environments. In December 1999, Sony introduced the Memory Stick Walkman, entering the digital audio market ahead of many competitors. However, the device did not play standard MP3 files. Because Sony owned a major record label, Sony Music Entertainment, the parent corporation designed its digital music players to protect its commercial catalog from piracy. The system utilized a proprietary format called ATTRACK 3, which required layers of digital rights management through Magic Gate hardware encryption and OpenMG jukebox software. Listening to a single song required a multi-step transfer path. A user had to rip a compact disc to a computer, convert the file to ATTRACK 3, register the computer with Sony servers, and register the specific device before transferring the track. This restrictive workflow contrasted with Apple's simpler ecosystem. Apple released the first iPod on October 23, 2001, and launched the iTunes Store in 2003, establishing a direct purchase and synchronization pipeline. Sony attempted to compete in July 2004 with the NWHD-1, a hard disk player. Yet, the NWHD-1 still lacked native MP3 support, requiring software conversion for all non-proprietary files. At the IFA Berlin trade show in August 2007, Sony announced the closure of its Connect Music Store. The service ceased operations on March 31, 2008, and Sony abandoned the ATTRACK format entirely. In early 2010, Sony discontinued production of its legacy 3.5-inch floppy disk drives. In April 2010, the final batch of Japanese-made cassette Walkmans shipped to local retailers. This final run of domestic hardware consisted entirely of the budget-oriented WMFX290 model, which featured an AM/FM radio. On October 25, 2010, international news outlets reported on the quiet phase-out, and Sony confirmed the official end of Japanese manufacturing in late October. By March 2010, cumulative sales of the cassette-based Walkman line had reached exactly 200,020,000 units. This figure represented half of the 400 million total Walkman-branded players sold across all media formats. While Japanese factories ceased operation, Sony licensed the Walkman trademark to a Chinese manufacturer to continue supplying cassette players to Asian and Middle Eastern markets. The physical object that had normalized private listening for a generation vanished without a public farewell. If you want to explore more stories about the slow deaths of cultural empires, subscribe to the channel. The physical cassette player disappeared from sidewalks, leaving behind a fundamentally altered urban environment. Since 2011, Sony has restricted the Walkman name to a niche line of high-resolution, flash memory, digital players. The shared cultural default of the 1980s, the blue and silver chassis clipped to a leather belt, has vanished. The decades-long debate over whether headphone listening in public was rude ended without any formal resolution. Instead, society simply adopted the practice. Sony lost its market dominance to digital distribution networks and simpler hardware ecosystems rather than a rival tape player. Today, passengers walking through airports in wireless earbuds move through a public world using a template created by the TPS-L2. They inhabit a private-public auditory sphere, even if they listen on hardware built by other companies. Today, the auditory isolation that once provoked municipal bans is the default global posture. The cassette Walkman is gone, but its victory is absolute. We now inhabit a world of universal private listening, forever wearing the invisible architecture of a device that redefined public life.